My name is Leslie Silverstone, pronouns she, her, and I'm very excited to present Patrick tonight. I have been reading religiously all the emails that you send out, Patrick, about the lobbying and what's going on in the different states about LGBTQ rights and what PFLAG National has been working on. And I thought, I know it's just really important for us to understand better, that we have a national organization that's really working for LGBTQ rights, and B, to really hear what that is about and perhaps how we can participate. So a little bit about Patrick. Patrick joined the team at PFLAG National in May of 2019. He grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, and went to the University of Maryland for his post-secondary education. He earned BAs in government and politics and in French. Oh, government, politics, and French, both cum laude in 2017, and then extended his time as a Terp for one additional year to get his Master's of Public Policy. Okay, and I just learned a few minutes ago what a Terp is. It's the, let me get this right, it's the University of Maryland mascot. It's a
Yes,
Terp.
it's a little turtle, a terrapin. Terrapin is shortened to Terp because in Maryland there are very funny accents. So there you go.
Thank you. While in school, he served as an intern in several congressional offices, as well as the Maryland Attorney General's office. Before coming to PFLAG, Patrick was a program manager at the Eisenhower Institute. He was also elected chair of the Virginia Young Democrats LGBTQA caucus in April of 2019. So welcome to Manhattan Beach PFLAG chapter, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Leslie. And thank you everyone at PFLAG Manhattan Beach for welcoming me. This was not included in my bio, but originally I'm actually from Long Beach, California. And I still consider myself a Californian because, you know, West Coast, best coast. So I hold the region that you're from near and dear to my heart. I was very excited to get the invitation to talk to you about all that PFLAG is doing in the advocacy space. And I've got a little presentation to kind of talk about what we're doing. It's just sort of a brief overview on the federal, state, and local level. So let me see if I can get this to go here. Overview of what's going on in the policy landscape in the country. This is mostly going to focus on the state level because there is frankly not a lot happening at the federal level. As you may have heard, this has been the least productive Congress in over 100 years. So there is very little happening there to mention. So we will just skip right on down to the state level. So it's no secret that unfortunately our community, the LGBTQ plus community, is facing historic challenges at the state level. This year, we are tracking 484 anti-LGBTQ plus bills across 40 states. Now, one of them is not California. We actually are not tracking any bad bills on the state level in the state of California, so go California. And I will also mention that as bad as 484 bad bills sounds, it was actually even worse last year. Last year, we were tracking about 510. So we're down a little bit from last year. These bills go into a number of different categories. We're seeing a lot of censorship efforts, which are bills that try to limit what you can talk about in classrooms, bills to limit books that can be on the shelves in public libraries and in school libraries. You know, kind of don't say gay bills are included in that category, et cetera, et cetera. We're also seeing continued efforts to try to ban medically necessary care for transgender and non-binary youth in a number of states. We are actually, unfortunately, up to 23 states which have banned gender affirming care this year, or up to this year, with 2 new states enacting bans this year. So we are very unhappy about that. We are also seeing continued efforts to ban trans athletes from participating in their school sports. And a new sort of category we're seeing this year, which is particularly disturbing, are what we're calling erasure bills. These are bills which very narrowly define sex in the state code to mean, biological sex, so excluding gender identity or gender expression or any of those other things. So we call them erasure bills because essentially what these bills would do is sort of pretend in the state code that trans people, non-binary people, intersex people, none of them exist. And we are not going to recognize them. And this, of course, would lead to a lot of issues in terms of accessing public spaces without discrimination, in terms of updating any necessary state documentation you may have, and the list goes on. That is a particularly disturbing trend we're seeing. We've seen those bills pop up in a number of states, and we've even seen them pass, unfortunately, into law in Idaho. And we expect Alabama to follow suit in a number of days here. We've seen, as I said, bills across 40 different states. They're not evenly distributed. As I mentioned, California actually doesn't have any bad bills that we're looking at. Oklahoma right now is in first place or last place, depending on your perspective on this, with over 50 of these anti-LGBTQ plus bills. So they account for over 1/10 of the total number of bills on their own. Iowa, Missouri, South Carolina, and Tennessee are all up there as well, each having over 30 bills on their own. So as I said, not evenly distributed, and some states are worse actors than others on this particular issue. Obviously, this kind of environment where you're having these legislative attacks on the state level really do stack the deck against LGBTQ plus people. And they obviously limit the rights of LGBTQ plus people, especially trans and non-binary youth. I did want to kind of hit on a couple of important points with these bills, though. Number one is that these are not grassroots efforts. These bills are being introduced across so many different states at the same time because this is a top-down effort. It is an orchestrated, coordinated effort by a couple of well-funded groups on the right to get these bills introduced and passed in various states. The reason we know this, the reason I know this, looking at all of those bills, is my lovely job, is because the bill language is identical when you go from state to state to state. So even though you have a very different kind of state constitution and state laws otherwise in, say, for instance, Florida, as you would in South Dakota or Iowa, the bills that they're looking at with regard to these attacks on the community are the same, exact same language. So it just goes to show you that this is a very coordinated effort from the other side here. And what they're really doing, these organized groups, is to try to exploit the fact that in a lot of parts of the country, people still have really never met, especially a trans person, especially a non-binary person. They don't know any trans or non-binary people, or at the very least, they don't know that they know any trans or non-binary people. If they have, those people in their lives, they're not out to them. So they kind of use this lack of familiarity to sow distrust, to sow this kind of fear of the unknown against marginalized communities like the trans, like the non-binary community. These bills, like I said, they especially are targeting trans youth and non-binary youth. But some of them are going even further and going after parents of trans youth. They're going after providers of gender affirming care. They're going after teachers. They're going after librarians who say, you know, it's my job to have inclusive libraries. It's my job to have an inclusive classroom. And they are criminalizing what we know to be medically necessary care. They are criminalizing what we know to be rights that students have in the classroom and in other educational settings under Title IX. And we know that not only are these bills, you know, unconstitutional in many cases, they're also just wrong. And they are making people who are already marginalized just that much less safe, just that much less protected, and just feeling that much worse. Now, of course, all of that was a lot of bad news. So I do want to make sure that I bring up that there are silver linings here. 91% of those 510 bad bills that I mentioned last year failed. And most of the bills will fail this year too. We've already seen actually in Georgia, in Indiana, in Iowa, Kentucky, and Nebraska, all of those states had tons of bad bills introduced. None of them passed this year. And we saw only one bad bill pass in Florida, actually, which was this really stupid, bad teacher training bill. But there were a lot worse bills on their docket this year. So we'll take that as a win, that that was the only bill that they managed to pass this year. The other silver lining is that there are lawsuits planned or currently in progress to help invalidate these laws, including gender affirming care bans, including athlete bans. Some of you may have seen actually recently the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a federal court, just invalidated the gender affirming care bans in West Virginia and North Carolina. Specifically the bans in those states which said, you know, we can't use Medicaid dollars to cover gender affirming care, or our state employee health coverage can't be used to cover gender affirming care. So that was a really, really important win in court. And we expect to see more wins. We've already seen a fair number of them across the spectrum here with the courts, but we expect that to continue. And I do also want to make sure that people know that even in the face of all of this, PFLAG voices still matter. PFLAG parents will always be an important voice for equality. And we're always going to keep you informed as bills move through your state legislatures. Now, obviously, for you guys in California, that's less of a worry that you'll see bad bills moving through. But if something happens, we will let you know. And on the local level, it is also true that your voices still matter. I do think that PFLAG parents have been an important part of the coalition to make sure that no bad bills passed in some of those states I mentioned earlier. We had lots of parents who went every single week to Tallahassee, to the state capitol in Florida, to fight back against those bills. And as I said, we were very successful. One of our regional directors, Ann Miller, lives in Georgia and helped us recruit a bunch of parents in Georgia to fight back against some bills there, including a really bad gender affirming care ban bill, including a really bad erasure bill. And those bills, along with all the other anti-LGBTQ bills that were introduced there, failed. So PFLAG voices have been very important in all of these states, as well as in California. So what is PFLAG National doing here? We are activating chapters not only on the state level, we are also activating chapters on the local level. We're seeing activity from anti-LGBTQ plus activists testifying in school board meetings, in library board meetings, county boards, you name it. And that includes in California. We have seen these bad actors trying to advocate for forced outing policies and for a number of other bad policies in California schools. These activists are going after, any mention of LGBTQ plus people or history in school curriculums. They're pushing for athlete bans. And as I mentioned, in California, one of the bigger fights we've seen is that they're pushing for forced outing policies, which I'm sure I don't need to tell a group of PFLAG parents why forced outing policies are a bad idea. It's, definitely puts kids at risk if their families are not ready to hear that information or not affirming, are still on their journey. It's a very bad position to put a child in. And it's a bad position to put a teacher in to force them to out their students. And PFLAG National, though, seeing all of this activity on the local level, is giving chapters resources to fight back. We have our fighting censorship resources. We have our Read with Love website and resources, if you've been able to access those. Chapters all over the country, Florida, Kansas, Oregon, you name it, have used these resources to counter these pro-censorship efforts, these anti-LGBTQ plus efforts in schools and in libraries. Last year, one of my kind of favorite examples of this, we had a PFLAG chapter, a group of teachers, and a GSA, Gay Straight Alliance, although now I think it doesn't actually stand for Gay Straight Alliance. I guess it's Gender and Sexuality Alliance, something like that is what GSAs mean now. I went to high school well before these kids. That's what it meant back then. But in Lansing, Kansas, all of these people came together and they were able to stop a policy which would have required all student clubs to give permission forms to parents before kids could join the clubs, which it was really evident that the policy was aimed at the GSA. They wanted to sort of out anyone who was involved in the GSA to their parents. And we were able to stop that policy from happening by getting together that PFLAG chapter. And as I said, teachers and students who were concerned about what the policy would do. We really packed the house at that school board and made good change. So that was a really important win for us. As I said, we're also fighting the bad state legislation that I went over earlier. Just in this fiscal year, so starting October 1st, we have sent out 74 action alerts to folks in 14 states. 15 of those action alerts went to Florida alone. And we had a very, very successful legislative session there. And I do think that our strong presence in Tallahassee really helped make sure we had a successful ledge session there this year. We've taken extra steps in Florida, in Ohio, to fund and recruit people to go to their state capitals to testify in person, because we had very important policy fights in both of those states. In Ohio, that effort is continuing. We unfortunately had a gender affirming care ban pass in February after a very, very long fight. Currently, that law is being enjoined because of a lawsuit, and we're going to keep fighting there. But those two states we've had to devote some special resources to. And then at the federal level, so I said before that there is not a ton of action in terms of bills happening at the federal level, and that is true, but we are still working at the federal level to secure as many rights as we possibly can for our community. Notably, we are supporting President Biden's new Title IX rules. I'm not sure how many of you saw the new Title IX rules that came out. I don't expect any of you to have read them. It's like 1,600 pages. But the long and the short of it is that they protect trans and non-binary students from harassment and discrimination in school. And you can look soon, we're putting this together for information about how to reach your legislators, your members of Congress and your senators to tell them to protect the Title IX rule. We are expecting that Congress is going to try to overturn these rules. We are expecting a vote probably in August or September. And we really are hoping that we can beat back this effort, that we can protect these rules, keep them in place because they're really important. And we were very proud to support the Biden administration's effort in ensuring that trans and non-binary students can be safe from harassment and discrimination where they went to school. Now, some of you may not know this, but it's actually an election year this year. There is an election happening in November. And we are so excited to be launching PFLAG Votes 2024 this summer. There will be more to come on this soon, but we have a new Vice President of Advocacy, Katie Blair, my boss, who is quite wonderful. And the two of us are planning the biggest PFLAG Votes effort yet. We did some pretty big efforts in 2020 and 2022. This one's going to be even bigger. It's going to be even better because we know just how much is at stake this time. We said it in 2022 and we said it in 2020, but it is very much still true in 2024, just how much is at stake for our families, for the LGBTQ community. We have some very important choices to make up and down the ticket. And we are going to be sure to provide everyone with all the tools they need to make sure that they know, not just who's at the top of the ticket. I'm pretty sure everybody knows who's at the top of the ticket at this point. But for your local races as well, if you have local school board races, if you have county board races, all of those things are in some ways even more important because they are the people closest to you who make policies that most closely affect your day-to-day lives. So we will be emphasizing all levels of government, making sure that people can make an informed vote and making sure that everybody knows their rights when it comes to voting, and make sure everybody knows how to get registered, how to deliver your ballots, and much, much more. So as I said, it will be a big effort. I am very excited. You will see a lot more of this summer. So having said all of that, is the last part of my presentation, and then we can go to questions. I just want to give you some pointers on how you can do advocacy in your community. I know I talked about how, we're not really seeing a ton of bad bills in California. You have the good fortune of having two very pro-equality senators in the federal Senate. I don't know, obviously, who all of your members of Congress are, but California does have a really great delegation of pro-equality members in the House as well. But that doesn't mean that there isn't still important work to be done in California. So I do want to talk to you about how you can get involved in your community here with advocacy. And that is very specifically to take action locally. As I said, that is where we have seen this wave of anti-LGBTQ plus advocacy from the other side is on the local level in California. So I really want to urge all of you to visit our Fighting Censorship page and to read through our messaging guide there. We have some very specific talking points to make sure that you know exactly what you need to say, how to augment your personal stories, because that, of course, is the most important thing, is to talk about your stories and your experiences. But we do have talking points to help augment that and make sure that you know the right policies to talk about. I also want to encourage all of you, if you want to talk to your local media, especially, to put some stories in the local media about the importance of LGBTQ plus equality, we encourage that. And you should talk to Laura McGinnis, who is our media relations manager. She can help you place those stories in local papers. She can even get you on your local news station. She is really awesome with connecting to local news. And that is kind of an underrated tool here, is, so many people get their news from local news. And unfortunately, we are seeing quite a number of local news stations kind of consolidating and having a lot of bad anti-LGBTQ plus stories being pushed out that way. So we'd like to counter those narratives as best we can. And of course, we would like you to attend your local government meetings. That Fighting Censorship page has information on how to organize ahead of your local government meetings, like school board meetings, library board meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So if you've never been to a meeting like that before, well, number one, I will tell you that generally they are not the best attended things in the world, but also because these people are so close to you in terms of the level of government, the things that you say, the stories you share, and the perspectives that you give to your local officials are incredibly important, and they're quite impactful. The other side is really organizing at the local level. And so it is just so important that we present a counterbalance to that, that we present the inclusive message, that we present the message of PFLAG love, all of that at the local level, to make sure that everyone from Orange County, wherever else all of you may be coming from, Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, everywhere else, all of those locals can know that we have a strong pro-equality presence in these communities, that we are the majority, and that we want to see pro-equality policies in our local government. So I'm going to end there.